For tonight's talk, we have Ken Jordan, who is the co-founder and editorial director and CEO of Lucid News. He has been a pioneer in progressive conscious culture for decades. In 2007, he founded the consciousness network Evolver and its online journal Reality Sandwich. At Evolver, he produced podcasts, live events, and online courses with many of the leading figures of the psychedelic movement and is the co-founder of the Alchemist Kitchen. Welcome, Ken.
Great to see you.
Nice to see you. Itzhak Beery, next to him is Itzhak Beery. Itzhak bridges the many sacred indigenous traditions. Elders entrusted in him with a relevant and essential present-day shamanic approach to living in our digital age. He empowers people around the world to reconnect to their innate shamanic gifts, and he shares the conviction that we are all shamans and we are able to interact and learn from the unseen and seen worlds in order to live in balance with our communities, nature, and ourselves. That's amazing, by the way. That's really cool.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for the description.
So I have 5 pages of questions.
Why don't you read them all first and then we'll go back.
And then we'll come back. No, but Itzhak reminded me that, you know, there's so many things we could talk about. The topic for today is really how can we integrate shamanic practices into our lives. But one thing that he did mention earlier before we started recording is that the practice, the shamanic journey is just one aspect of a journey an individual takes. There's also what we have to consider the connection to the community. And so the journey really is connection to nature, but also connection to each other. We are all intertwined, our spirits are intertwined. And one of the things that Itzhak shared with us last Saturday when we had the tea ceremony is that there is the unseen world, right? And so Itzhak, how do you would like to talk more about that connection to the unseen world?
No, as you mentioned, part of my training is to believe and experience that we are all shamans. And part of the assumption that we are all shamans is that we are all dreamers. And we are all daydreamers. We all have, naturally, we have the ability to dream, to vision. And so I believe that if you accept that part of our decision-making, part of our daily life is connected to messages that we receive through dreaming or visioning, then we need to live in both worlds, in the physical world or the physical that we, in the shamanic tradition, we don't think of it as a physical world. We think about it that all the worlds are matter, all the worlds are energies, all of the worlds are spirit in many ways. We, in our cultures, we separate between the two. It's just that it's our incapability to hold the whole concept that the world is all energy or movement or vibrations. And so I think that as long as one can dream, one can have vision, we are all shamans.
When you say we're all shamans through dreams, from a Western perspective, right? When I hear that, I feel like you're stepping around the question around spirit. But what is it that speaks through the dream?
What my personal belief that is messages from spirit, messages from energies or entities that are surrounding us throughout the day, all the time. And they could be our ancestors, that could be our teachers in the spirit world, that could be energy that are wants to come in and give us some messages. I truly believe that all messages, all dreams and daydreams come from spirit, come from another entity. we are a receptors of those visionary, and we need to learn how to decipher it, to understand what it means. What is it? Sometimes they come to us in a very clear word. You know, tomorrow there's going to be an accident. Tomorrow something will happen. That is a warning. That's some kind of dreams. And sometimes if they come in a guise of another entity, or in symbols, or in animal spirit world. So we need to learn. One of the things that is so important for me is that we are doing a lot of shamanic work. We're doing a lot of breath work. We do a lot of plant medicine work, but we don't speak the language of shamanism.
You mean
We as a culture in the Western world, where indigenous people are raising their children with ayahuasca, with the plant medicine, to understand that we are all connected, that everything has spirit, that there's no separation between the seen and the unseen world. It is our misgiving to think that there are two separate worlds.
So part of it is about sensitivity. It's about developing the sensitivity to notice these messages that come from spirit, whether you're awake or dreaming, right? In dreams, they come through sometimes more profoundly and clearly, especially without the training, right?
Yeah.
But that part of the shamanic training is actually noticing how the spirit expresses itself, or they get expressed through these other things that you might see. It could be an animal, it could be a sound, it could, and notice it could be many different things, but it's noticing it rather than somehow assuming that matter is dead, that the world essentially is without intention, that life, the life in the forest is without intention, which tends to be more the Western way of approaching something.
So I think that there was a separation between the mind and the heart in the modern or our Western civilization, that we worship the logic, you know, from before the big three religions began. But so the difference is that in the indigenous world, they think or they feel from their heart. They don't think about nature, they feel nature. And so they are able to absorb or experience spirit, not from the mind. The mind is just the tool that we're always the thing that comes in, but it's from the heart. So they speak to nature, they speak to trees, they speak to animals, they speak to the stars of the cosmos, and to each other too. It's not just you know. So the big divide is that the two cultures speak in different language. They speak from the mind or the logic, or from the ego part, or from fear. Where indigenous cultures speak from their heart. They are opening their heart to the universe, and so they receive messages of their heart. So for them to understand, to interpret the meaning of what they see is come from here. They're not come from our psychological, logical, you know, all that stuff.
And so when you talk about, you know, the animals, right? I don't know about you guys, but I could probably name like one or two, no, I should say like 10 animals. And so when we go through the journey and there's animals that are coming, like you mentioned the jaguar last Saturday, right? And I'm not familiar with that animal, but it comes through. How would I like interpret that? Because then is that just my imagination? Is that just like a figment of my mind trying to make sense of things? Or like how can I know more about what does it actually mean? And what is the role of the animals within that particular journey?
I think that it's a great question because, also in plant medicine, many people experience connection to certain animals. And that doesn't mean that you really have to go and run to the forest and hug a jaguar.
Mhm.
But it means that we, not just we in the West, but the people, the indigenous people, assign different medicine, assign different energies, a quality to each of the animals. So the colibri, the hummingbird, hempe, schwa, is the energy of balance. So he's the god of balance in the Schwa tradition, but he's also a teacher of the perseverance. He's a teacher of always look for the honey in mysterious places. So, and the jaguar would teach you a different teaching, like the eagle or the condor or others. And I think that part of my thing about, when you do a plant medicine is that sometimes you receive messages and people take them sometimes literally instead of looking at the medicine part in the teaching of that. So in other words, if you are standing in your vision on a cliff and you just jump into the void, it doesn't mean that next week you have to go and do it, right?
I don't know about you.
I don't want to be there.
But
It's a
you
bad
might
idea.
you might want to think about that. You might want to take risk in your life. So it's a symbol more than a literate call or symbol. And I think part of my work when I take groups who do plant medicine is to speak to them about the language of shamanism. And I also started to teach that because I think that so many people are doing so much shamanic work, and each one talk about their power animal, but they really don't understand to look at the symbols of each of the colors. For instance, each color has a different vibrations and a different meaning. Like, for instance, yellow is the color of the sun. The sun is new beginning, right? So it is an optimistic color. It's a beginning of renewal. Red would be about passion and blood and love, and blue would be about healing. So each color in the plant medicine, it tells you a different story. And for people who goes to the jungle or to the Brooklyn basement or another place, and they don't understand, they don't speak the language.
So there's two things there. One is the approach to colors, symbols, energies as they come. But you're initiated in two different tribal lineages. One is Andean, the other is Amazon.
Yeah.
Do the animals and colors match across both lineages, or are there times where and one green means one thing here and green means something else over there?
There's a lot of overlap. We think that they are so separate, the communities, but they are not. There's a lot of exchange. That the people from the Amazon would go up into the Andes. They will share their cultures, symbols, and then the people from the Andes will go down into the Amazon. So they will share, and then the people with the Schwa, which is like far away in the middle of the jungle, they will take 7 days canoe ride and visit the Sequoia people. They intermarriage with each other. So a lot of those symbols, they are common. they're not, I mean, maybe not exactly, but what they are looking for is the way and the behavior of each of the animals and what it means to us, how they would reflect on us. And then that's the medicine. So we can learn that if you are a jaguar, you
I have to go to Google that up. How does a jaguar look like?
yeah. So you behave like a jaguar. And if you are a hempe or a hummingbird, there is a teaching for you there that you need to keep your balance and look for the honey not in the obvious places, but in the hard to get places. So there's a lot of these teachings. So when you when I was in with the Schwar, with ayahuasca, I saw this god, and he said that he's hempe. And so I know what his message for me. It's not that I see that I'm going to meet a man with golden skin, maybe. But that was the hempe showed up and spoke to me. But I take the wisdom part, not the physical or it's not physical, but the way
The message, more the message of the message of the vision.
So it's a kind of funny dance a little bit about how, because so many people have a tendency to get very literal about their download. Come back from Peru, decided that everything that they got, every message they got is something they have to believe in very strongly.
And
they're
act
getting
on it.
directed and act
Yeah.
on it. And that's not necessarily the healthiest thing to do. So how do you help people temper that enthusiastic embrace? Like, one of the things that I learned in my practice was you wait after getting the download. You don't necessarily share it with anybody else. Keep it to yourself for a while and let it sit for a while and see what emerges out of it, rather than kind of assuming that it is literally true the moment you've received it and you have to act on it. Yeah.
Well, I had two clients that did a sex change operation, because the message that they received from plant medicine was to become a woman. Now, I'm not saying that they would not have done it otherwise, but they did not even think about the idea that maybe it means show off more of your feminine side. You don't have to alter your physical form. They came to me when they were already changed, but they had so much trouble because they received this message that they need to become women.
So they got disillusion from that message? Did they got disillusion from that message? Did it cause more of an issue? Or when they came to you for guidance?
So there is a disalignment with the soul, right? So if they had listened to the message to become more loving and familiar with their feminine side, they may not need to do the outside surgery. I mean, the outside surgery doesn't mean that you actually embrace your feminine side.
It should be coming from the inside out.
On the outside, you become a woman, but what about the inside? And that's the work. That's the work. The problem is that, for the last 15 years, right? There's this explosion of plant medicine in all kind of forms, from frogs. I mean, it's not a plant, all of that stuff. And I understand the excitement, because as we talked before, the Western world experiencing a deficit of spirituality. Nobody believes in anything anymore. And so there is a hunger for something meaningful.
You have to see it to believe it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so religious failed us, government failed us, health insurance failed us, institution failed us. What do we believe in? So there's a hunger to find something to take us into
A deeper meaning.
which is the real world,
Mhm.
you know. But in order to do that, you need to learn the language of it, and that comes from the heart. And that part is not really being taught about or taught about. And so we, in many ways, we just leave people hanging on, you know, like, let's see what happens type of thing. But we need to teach them. It's like if you go to Italy and you don't speak Italian, you don't really understand what the hell they're talking about there. Yeah, I mean, you can drink the cappuccino and you can enjoy that. That's what
And
I
eat the
do.
pizza.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll tell you where to go. But but they
But-
don't really get
But you don't
the
understand the
richness
culture. Yes.
of,
Yes.
of the language. And I think that that's what we really need to. I don't know. Maybe it will take time.
Mhm.
That this enthusiasm about the plant medicine will kind of like subside, so we can go back to like the real essence of it.
So let me understand what you're saying, because I mean, the enthusiasm about plant medicine is what is leading a lot of people to think about shamanism.
Yeah,
So is your sense that now people are so overly enthusiastic about using plants as medicine in a Western way? I take this for this effect, I take that for that effect, that they're kind of missing the boat on the shamanic underpinnings of that have led to the use of those plants in the indigenous context.
you know, I think that there's two trends, kind of. So that there are the Western medical or or more institutionalized that take ayahuasca, MD, and other medicine for the therapeutic part of it, and they disconnect it from their origin. They do it in psychotherapy rooms or in a hospital setting. They're disconnecting from the spirit ceremonial part. And then there is part of people who are done that many times and got nowhere. And so they want to go deeper, and they are going to the other side, like to my side, maybe, or more deeper understanding of spirit and the shamanic tradition. They really want to experience the indigenous way of working with spirit. So I think that there are like almost two paths. And then there was people who just jumped ships, you know, like they would just go and experience that. They don't really think that. But there's also people who heard about ayahuasca and plant medicine, and they think that it's an initiation, that they have to do that. You know, they're already 35 years old and they didn't do it. That something is wrong with them, you know. So because of the kind of like cultural pressure. You know,
Everybody else is doing it.
everybody else was doing it. I gotta do it.
I gotta do it.
I'm not afraid, or should I be afraid? Or I'm afraid, but I'm gonna prove myself that I can do it. I don't know. I mean,
When somebody comes to you
yeah,
and says, hey, I want to go with you to Ecuador
yeah.
because I'm 35 years old and I'm the CEO of this company, I've never done ayahuasca and all my employees don't respect it. What do you say to them?
So I in my trips, I do 1 week of intensive healing and training before. So we go to the Andes and we do Olympias and we do sound healing, we do Wachuma. So we kind of
For a second, you do Wachuma. That's, I mean, that's
Wachuma is like
not so light,
light.
but yeah. For you.
Oh, come on. It's life. It's not ayahuasca. But anyway, but
It's
But-
mescaline.
but not in the first day.
Yeah.
No, we kind of prepare and then we do shamanic journey work. We do integration work. And in my trips, we do a lot of integration, like after every session, after every healing, we're talking about it, we share it, we're learning from it. So I'm not just letting people who came unprepared to fall into the darkness of depression.
So you, with the right kind of context, somebody can enter into this, even if they don't necessarily know what they're getting into in the first place.
Yes, so first of all, they know what they're going to. It says healing expedition. So it's not about, it's about healing. And ayahuasca is only one part of it. It's not the whole thing. Sometimes the more strongest experience is actually the Olympia. Because the Olympia is incredibly powerful.
Well, then what is the Olympia?
Olympia is a purification ceremony that you remove negative energy inside, outside from the energy body of a person, and you install good energy and create protection. So, so you remove possession, you remove attachment, and other things like that. And it's include fire and stones and eggs and candles and Florida and flowers and stuff. It's a very complex ceremony. For some reason, they don't do that in Peru. It's a very ancient ceremony that is mostly done in the high end. My teacher and some other like elders who still do that. But that's where I take them because and that's what I do also here at York. It's not, I don't have all the equipment that the stuff they have, but I do my best here. But it's a very powerful stuff, and it really changes. Well, it really changes the electromagnetic field of the person, inside and outside, or the positive and negative ions.
Can
Is
you
it-
measure that?
Well,
Can you measure it? When you said the positive and negative ion.
you can actually, I never measure it, but you can actually feel it.
You can
The
feel
the
it.
energy of the
You
person?
can feel how it all changes.
Is it possible to, because, is it possible to do it alone by yourself as opposed to going out into the Amazon? Like, not everyone can actually take 2 weeks off and go to the Amazon. And so is there rituals and meditations? Because I know I read your book. I know that there's portions where you could, but is that something that in the Western world can be integrated more into daily life, or?
Well, absolutely. I mean, you need somebody to do the
initial?
ceremony for you,
Mhm.
because the ceremony is very similar to ayahuasca in the way that it removes all the stuff, and it really allows you to connect with the cosmos. And part of ayahuasca, or the Ahe ceremony, is really not about vision. It's so much more. It's really more about opening your heart and connecting to the matrix, to the cosmos. In many ways, the shamans, through their icaros, they weaving the matrix, or they're connecting to the sublime beings in the universe. And so the purpose of Yahe is not to see visions, but to open your heart, to truly be part of them. And then that's the healing. So once you are open up like that, then the healing happens. There's no blockage that,
For the energy to flow.
But it's the same thing in many times. It happens spontaneously during the leap year ceremony. People feel like they forget where they are. They are just like reconnecting to the spirit world.
And so from when you started out when you were what, like 30 years old, when you got
No,
earlier?
I started when I was 45.
Really? Wow, not too late. There you go.
No, I actually recommend people not to do it before.
Ah, why is that?
You have to be adult.
Hmm.
I'm not saying, I mean, in indigenous cultures, people start to train when they are 8 years old,
Mhm.
and they go through the life stages, but they expect them to get married.
Mhm.
They expect them to have children. They expect them to be responsible for community. And all of those life experiences you take into the work that you do. So if you are 16, 18, 32, you don't have the life experience, the gravity.
No, but you're also in the context, the cultural context where there are elders. So if you're learning it when you're young and in the indigenous lineages, they start you young, but there's a lot of people around there holding your hand as you learn. how to do it.
Absolutely.
You in the West, we don't have that grounding,
No.
and opening up to some of this stuff can be very destabilizing for younger people, in my experience.
Yes, yes.
It's actually so surprising, so shocking
Hmm.
in a way to start to open the heart in a way where you notice these things you had not noticed before. That I'm convinced that this is because we have an aging culture, we have like more and more people over 65 with nothing to do. They should all be training to become shaman, as far as I'm concerned. And that this is where the opportunity is for real healing in the culture.
Yes.
I agree. But I think that a lot of young people are coming to me when they're 18, and they want to be shaman. And I say, why?
It's cool. It's cool.
Because I feel the calling to be a shaman. I says, did you have sex before? How can you heal people without the experience of being with another person?
That's a precursor. That's a requirement prior to.
Sure. How can you heal someone if you don't know what it is to raise a child? Take responsibility. How can you heal someone when you don't understand grief?
Hmm.
You lost someone.
The life experiences.
Yes, but we're not really doing automatic or mechanical work. It is the work of the heart. So if you went through those life experiences and you understand loss, and you understand betray, and you understand raising children, then you can be empathic to the clients that comes to you.
You did mention that shamanism is hard work. That there's a lot of, like, you have to be protective of yourself as well, because there's a lot of energy exchange.
Yeah. It's not what you know, really. I mean, like in my training, I learned a lot of techniques, of being around it. But at the end, what Ipo Piara used to say, shaman from the Amazon, that you heal with your heart. So when you are compassionate for somebody who comes to you and suffers the loss of loved one, or loss of lover, or whatever it is, it's not an abstraction. You're not like a social worker that you read it in a book and this is how you're going to do that. You hold space for that person, but you are also compassionate to that, and that healing. Because when a person believes or feel that your heart is open to them, that's healing.
And you also mentioned that for shamans to keep your day job. Like at the beginning, you had your agency, right? Your ad company.
Yeah.
And then you started doing your healing work. Can you share a little bit about that time period?
You know, that's something that is personally, I'm not quite sure how this all came about, but that people wants to be healers. And they want to do it full time. And they want to do it when they are 28. Most shamans that I know, indigenous people, they have a regular job. They are carpenters, they are grass cutters, they are teachers, they are all kinds of things. They have something to support them. So when they work with spirit, they are balanced. And they're not dependent on their clients for living. What happened for us is that we want to make money doing what we think we love, but then we are making compromises with our clients. We are trying to please them. I don't care if my clients is not happy. I'm not here to make them happy. I'm here to give them the work of spirit, right? So I'm not depending if they come back or not come back. I don't put them on a schedule that they have to be there every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. I don't care if they come. They have to speak to their own spirit to see if they want to come. And so I think that it's very important that people who are doing spiritual work have another job to support their the material world, so they can be free to do the healing work. It might sound revolutionary now, but I think that it's very important, incredibly important. And I also want to say about the life of a healer. So Ikupiara used to say that the life of a healer is 7 years.
7 years?
Yeah. Because the first 3 years, you put everything in it, especially if you don't have any other job. And then the third year, the fourth year, you accumulate so much negative energy from the client that it starts to make you tired and sick. But in the beginning, you don't really understand that because it's like part of your life. And then at 7 years, you get sick. And a lot of people who I work with are healers. They became depleted, and they don't take the repercussion to protect themselves, like taking a bath or sea salt or all that stuff you do for protection, because they believe that they are invisible.
But it's the same thing with yoga teachers, right? Like yoga, you're supposed to be taking care of your body, but there's a lot of yoga teachers that are, injured, their hips, their knees, just because it's part of, or they think that they have to quote unquote perform in order to like teach a class. And so talk to us about, the integration back into life. So if you go on a journey, you get your vision, and how can we take the lessons into everyday living? How can we just bring that back so that it is transformational and we're not just like, oh, I'm doing ayahuasca ceremony, I'm gonna puke like my guts out, and how can that just not be an experience but really be transformational? And how often should one do a ceremony?
Well, my take on how many, which is
Once in a lifetime. I don't know.
no, well, I noticed that people who are in this community, when they say, hi, my name is, I did 80 ceremonies.
80?
Well, that's usually it's like, I did 20 ceremonies, 30 ceremonies, 80 ceremonies, 120. I know the people who do that.
Oh, no, absolutely.
I mean, this is a
But
kind of
the point is that, yes, so it's not about the number, it's about the intention and the approach. the way that the shamanic practice works with, say, an ayahuasca ceremony, it's not meant to be done very often. It's meant to be done when you're sick. But I mean, let's go even further. You're actually, the indigenous lineage is that the sick person doesn't drink ayahuasca.
That's right.
The shaman drinks ayahuasca.
Exactly.
The person who is sick goes there, lies there, and does whatever the shaman then thinks is best for the healing. This idea of people sitting in a circle and drinking ayahuasca is a relatively new phenomenon, although there are indigenous cultures where it does happen, but it's not like, it's maybe they'll do it once a year, or if there's a particular ceremonial situation where the community comes together. There's maybe an initiation ceremony for somebody who's going through an aging, like they're turning 13 or something like that.
Yeah.
This idea that you drink ayahuasca to get close to God and have spiritual epiphanies is totally not the practice in indigenous cultures.
No,
Because they already got their connection.
that's right.
They don't need the ayahuasca to give them the connection. They got the connection as part of the culture. So we have, in the last 50 years, been inventing a way of working with plant medicine,
Mhm.
where we bring, where essentially it becomes an extension of this idea of the personal journey, which, have been with mushrooms or with LSD or something like that before, but it's like, well, ayahuasca is the big one, right? Or iboga is the big one, the ayahuasca is pretty big. And depending on who you talk to. There's a whole, so then I think you can talk about it better than me probably. A lot of people have the sense that the more you do it, the cleaner you get, or that you advance. But in fact, many people find themselves repeating essentially similar experiences over and over again, where they're sitting in a circle, passively receiving whatever the medicine is bringing to them, and they're not learning skills that enable them to either work with the medicine more effectively, because they're not learning shamanic practices, particularly themselves, and they're not integrating what they've learned in a way that allows them to move on in their lives to something better and more profound, right?
No, this is absolutely right. The role of the shaman or the ayahuasca. So first of all, we need to talk about who gives this ayahuasca. So there's a ayahuasquero. This is a person who learned how to prepare and give. And then there is the shaman, who is also ayahuasquero. And then there is what I call bartenders.
Bartenders.
Bartenders, the people who, the people from the West who goes to the Peru and learn for 3 weeks how to prepare
The medicine.
They are now ayahuasca. The role of the shaman is to heal. And they do the healing throughout the ceremony. They are interacting with the work of spirit. In other words, they take that in order to penetrate the person's body and to take the poison arrows from the body, or the jealousy, anger, all the envy, all of that negative energies in a person's body. And when they take ayahuasca, they go through the body and see where it's at. And then they do either physically they do the healing, or they work with the spirit world to remove it. Those are the people you want to work with. And then there is the ayahuasqueros, these are the people who know how to prepare it, or how to create to hold space for that. And they are usually an apprentices for the shaman of ayahuasca. I think that we have in the Western world, we don't really ask people who we drink from what is their training. None of them, I believe, are shamans, ayahuasca. And I think that that's kind of dangerous, because when you are working with plant medicine, things happen. And you need to learn how to navigate or how to remove. If somebody have a spiritual attack, you need to learn how to do it, how to move it.
You can't call 911 in the middle of the jungle.
You can, but then nothing, nobody will come.
Nobody would come.
Actually, that happened to us in a Pishona in Brazil. You know that the shaman was there, but it was Carol were puking too much, and he ran away. And so we were just with one of the shamans, and he had to leave. And so we were there with all that's happening all around. A person who transformed into a jaguar and is starting to yell and scream, and people are with all of that, and we were just us.
And then what happened?
Well, I was there, but I could not hold all of that. I took care of the emergencies.
Triage.
Yeah. So things like this could happen. Many times it's happened. Now, in the question for integration, I think that it's in the psychopathy tradition, they don't do integration. They just let you drink yahe. We wait until the morning on the hammock. We eat breakfast, and nobody talks. It is your inner reflection. But they speak the language of shamanism. When we come there, we are not.
So this is my shaman. I
with that. So
see him.
I do integration circles after
Yeah.
each ceremony.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks. I didn't get a sense. Oh, okay. But thank you.
You know, when you do
This is him. Yes, cross.
ayahuasca in Brooklyn yoga studio basement,
We don't have to listen, but
you
I just.
leave,
Definitely.
and there's no follow-up.
Do you want to walk
There's no
instead of?
part of shamanic work is community.
Absolutely.
And we don't have community to support people who are going through incredibly tough experience. And so people are left hanging out with all of that emotion to process. And I don't know too many shamans who are doing integration circles after ayahuasca. I've done a few of them before. And then I heard of a few people who do that. And there is a Facebook page for people who have done ayahuasca or something like that. But it's not part of our real community.
And this is something that's really missing, I think, right now, for the whole psychedelic world.
Yeah.
Right? New York certainly is extended, integration circles that are available over time, not just the day after or even the week after, right? Because for a lot of people, it doesn't really hit for months.
For months.
And then you're like, oh, okay, now I could really talk to, it'd be great to talk to somebody. Right? But if you don't have that opportunity, right? There's the New York Psychedelic Society, there's one in Brooklyn, but they're not really holding those kinds of circles yet. And there's a need for that, I think, for people who've gone through shamanic as well as other sort of psychedelic experiences,
All right,
where
let's-
similar kinds of things
let's do
come
it.
up. Let's do it.
So we have 10 minutes left. So this is really fascinating. And like I said, I have 5 pages of questions and I didn't really ask one, but I'd like to open it up to the audience, in-house audience. Do you guys have any questions for Itzhak and Ken?
I have a question from the chat. Actually, there's a lot of people joining us through the live stream. Thank you for being here. But Harrison was listening in and he was wondering when you were talking about having life experience, if you're connected to your past lives, why would age matter?
That's a good one.
So our soul is housed in this body. Our body experiences the daily life in order to process all these life purpose or life challenges. And so until we experience that, we are not ready. In a way, like I truly believe in biology. So, there is a child, even if it has a past life experience as a shaman, he's still a child. And he will grow into a teenager, he's going to rebel. Then he's going to reproduce or have what we call sex. And then he will get into a time of early maturity, the understanding of what does it in life. And then you go into the 40s, which is the time of midlife crisis. We call it midlife crisis, but actually it's the time of wisening, of asking the big questions. Who I am, why I'm here, But it's all because you already have all those experiences, of physical experiences in this world, physical and emotional. So I don't think we can skip a stage. In other words, 18 years old cannot have that wisdom or life experience that a 40 years old have. And I think it's a mistake to give a person illusion that they can. That's why I think that they need to do whatever they want until the age of 40 or 45. And then even in the Kabbalah, they talk about the age of 40, the age of wisdom, where you walk into the Valdez, into the wisdom, the mystical wisdom. That is where you do, because that's your role. And at 50 or 55, or you get into the age of mentoring. That's where you learn all of those wisdom and all your experiences, and you want to give it to somebody else. That's the teaching time. And that you can extend as long as you can, because that's the age of wisdom. But you can't skip human experiences. You can't learn it in PhD in psychology, what it means to feel grief. You have to feel grief. And you have to feel love. You really have to experience love with all of that aspects of it. You can't skip that, because it's not. Now, if we are connected to past life experiences, yes, of course. We have a lot of us dragging a lot of traumas from past life. I had one, I never believed in it, but I experienced it, so now I believe in it. But that is true, and that's almost like many times in our work, we can see it and maybe heal that or fix it. But no skipping.
The unseen world.
What?
Connecting to the unseen world takes time. So.
Yeah.
And experience. So a question from our audience?
Question: how did you find that ayahuasca compared to psychedelic mushrooms and LSD as far as tapping into that realm? Personally, I feel that it is kind of a shortcut to the spiritual realm, but I do feel that also it is like a reflection of what's going on in your inside consciousness and expanding it. So it's very hard to know really what you're seeing and what you're not seeing is real or unreal, which is probably why you're saying you have to be physically mature enough to understand a little bit about that. If you don't know yourself, how can you possibly experience what that difference might be? And you might then have a bad experience because of the lack of knowledge. So in that realm, as far as the unseen, how did you compare? I'm assuming you've tried all three.
That's for you.
Yeah, well, I'd love to know, because ayahuasca seems like it's like a kind of like a cultural cool thing now amongst the movie stars and whatnot. And they must be dangerous, because I'm sure,
It's not dangerous.
It's not dangerous.
No, it's not
like if they
dangerous.
see something that's not really there.
Well, you probably see stuff that's not really there all the time, whether you're on a psychedelic or not, right? This is human, right? You learn I mean, this is the same in any kind of shamanic practice. You learn by screwing up. You learn by essentially overly trusting something that comes to you, being too literal about it, and then discovering that in fact, oh, that was a mistake. And it's actually, a lot of it is feeling. It's heart based. You can eventually notice the difference physically between things that are high vibrational and low vibrational. It's a visceral physical thing, which takes experience, right? I mean, it's just by you don't know at first, and then eventually you start to go, oh, this is it. And a lot of it is just experience based. You sort of discover like, oh, that's how that works. Versus, oh, that was, oh, that really was a mess, right?
So you have to go through it in order to gain that wisdom, is
Yeah.
basically what you're saying. You
And
kind of have
yeah.
to shed all your cultural conditioning and deprogram yourself so that you could see through a clearer pair of eyes, whether you call it your third eye or your,
You develop, I mean, my experience of it is you develop a sensitivity
Mhm.
that you may not be aware your body is capable of until you go through the shedding of the heavy things that you carry.
And that's why
That
the
become
limpia is
blockages.
really necessary, right?
That becomes part of a process,
Mm.
right? But then the difference between, let's say, ayahuasca and LSD and mushrooms, part of it is actually very personal. I think people are kind of tuned to respond to different kinds of compounds or psychedelic medicines, and you get drawn to them, really, frankly, in a different way. So some people, for them, I know LSD does the same in some aspects, certain things that are similar to ayahuasca, right? All these things can open up your connection to spirit or to that kind of aspect of connection. They also have different durations, right? So an ayahuasca experience tends to be something that goes on for, say, you'll drink 3 different cups over the course of several hours, and it becomes something that can last, 6 to 8 hours, pretty much. And so it's a real commitment. LSD is a much longer commitment, right? But you tend not to do it in a ceremonial context, so you don't notice it in the same way. And then mushrooms is in between, right? But there are very profound, and you know much more about this than me, very profound ceremonial lineages working with mushrooms that are just as profound as ayahuasca in that way, right? And in terms of connecting to spirit and working with that kind of awareness of the unseen.
It seems like it's more of a shedding of like your false self, the ayahuasca. It seems to like take off that outer layer of negativity and falseness, so you're kind of in sort of fresh and new you when you come out of it. That's what I'm understanding.
I mean, it works for me. Okay, so it is in some ways a bigger commitment in terms of what it demands from you and what it calls out of you than mushrooms can be, right? Than LSD certainly can be, right? But I'm uncomfortable saying that one is better or more effective than another, because a lot of that is actually very personal. Excuse me. And it also has to do with the way that the lineage works with it, right? Because there are extraordinary shamans who work with mushrooms, right? In that way too. So it's not, but there's something interesting about how ayahuasca is now essentially being called into service by Western society. Whereas not that long ago, that was not happening. And the people who were doing it early on, like say in the 50s and 60s, like say Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs, right? They did not want to do it more than once. They were like, no, I mean, and I actually knew those guys. And boy, that was a hard experience for them. Whereas, like you say now, like you meet some guy from Brooklyn and he's like, man, yeah, I just finished my 85th ceremony, right? Yeah. That was not how there was something. It was it demanded much more of a Western psyche to kind of break through into the way that ayahuasca calls you to be connected to the unseen, that then they were really ready to do, right? And I think there's something very interesting about how that's shifted over the last 3 decades.
Just because, I really feel like well, nature is actually telling us to go back and reconnect. There is such a need for it with climate change, with what's happening in like South America with agriculture, they're losing the Amazon, and all that. It is 8:02, so we will need to end at this point. I'd like to thank Ken Jordan and Itzhak Beery for coming to the Alchemist Kitchen and sharing your wisdom. This is the first time, but it won't definitely be the last time, because we need to dig deep into other areas about plant medicine. So thank you so much. And I'd like to thank the folks that joined us online and the folks that are here in person. Thank you for commitment to yourself as well as to the community. So blessings to all. Travel home safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.